It's a beautiful day outside, you head out for a drive in your Z4, push the maximum sun button, the windows drop, the roof unlatches, and then nothing. Well, this is most likely your problem, a corroded electric motor. It's a common fault with these cars, and this is a quick video to show you how to replace it without taking the whole roof off. So the motor is located in one of the drainage wells behind here. Not the best design, mixing electric and water, but thankfully it's a relatively easy fix. To start, we're going to need to take the parcel shelf out. There are two retaining clips on either side, which you can easily squeeze together and they'll pop through. You can retrieve these later. Next, you have to pull off the fabric seam from the front edge of the parcel shelf. And then you can pull away the hinge on both sides. After that, move the parcel shelf all the way over to the right hand side and you should be able to just slide it straight out. And don't forget to retrieve the retaining clips that have fallen inside. Next up, we need to take the hinge assembly off on the side that we're working. The first bolt is a T30 Torx bit. The second bolt is a 10mm. And whilst you don't have to necessarily take the hinge out to access the motor, at a later point we're going to relocate it to the boot and we need to cut away some of the plastic to allow access for the hoses. And the third fixing is a washer with a pin through the centre. First you need to pry out the pin with some pliers. I didn't film me taking out the pin, but you get the idea. And then you can use a screwdriver to pry out the washer. After that, the hinge assembly should be able to come right out. It may get a little bit snagged on the top of the suspension mount, but it will come out eventually. And after that, you should be able to peer in and see the dreaded motor housing. For this next bit, you're going to have to climb inside the boot. I'm about 6 foot and it was quite snug but manageable. To give you an idea of what you're working with, you've got 3 cable ties here, here, and there's one right at the back down there. It's impossible to get to them all, so we're going to have to take the top of the motor housing off. Some of them do have tape around them, but mine fortunately didn't. Using a spanner, or I would advise a pry bar, you need to work on finding the edge of the top of the motor housing and just prying that away so you can access the motor. So this next bit I needed 2 hands for, so it was a bit difficult to film it, but essentially you're pulling the motor out of the housing and trying to break away any cable ties that are holding the hoses. I found this easiest by guiding in a set of pliers with your hand and just using that to snap away the cable tie. Now that we have the motor out, you can see that the soundproofing that's around it is completely soaked with horrible rusty water. And it's no surprise really that this motor decided to pack up. Once you've pulled the motor through, you can retrieve the bottom half of the motor housing. I'll suggest putting in some paper towel to soak up the water that's at the bottom of it. With the whole unit out, you can see why I've used a spanner to lever up the front edge. And on the back is the cable tie that was impossible to get to without removing the roof. Now to remove the waterlogged motor. There are 2 wires connected to the bottom. Just make sure you remember which side you took them off. Then we'll need to remove these 2 4mm Allen bolts. And we want to break the joint closest to the motor. I used some WD-40 on these screws before as they looked quite corroded. Then as you're about to separate the 2, make sure you hold it upside down so the hydraulic fluid doesn't flow out. So at this point you can just replace the motor, but I was keen to see if we could get the old one working again. A friend from work forced all the water out of it with an air line, connected it to a power supply, ran it both ways and it seemed to come to life. Thanks Alex. If you do definitely want to fix it all in one day though, you can pick up a new electric motor. Here's the part number. I think they cost about £150. So now we can get to work reassembling the motor and testing to see if the roof works. You'll need to line up the little groove that's on the end of the motor with the opening further in. Then install the screws and tighten them both up and reconnect the positive and negative wires. Again, you could mark the outside of the electric motor just to remind yourself which way the wires go. To test the motor, first a little micro switch needs to be pushed down by the front of the parcel shelf. So I simply rested that in, push the button, and voila, all back and working again. With the roof now operational, we can relocate the pump unit somewhere dry so we don't have this problem again. Some slight modifications need to be made to the hinge bracket so that the hoses have a channel to run through. I first offered up the hinge bracket, figured out where I was going to cut it, and then used a small hacksaw just to cut a V in the plastic. I also did the same thing on the bracket itself around here, and there we have a hole for the hoses to pass through. So now insert the hinge bracket, making sure the two cutout sections line up and that the hoses and wires aren't pinched. Now we can fasten it in place, first with the washer and pin that goes in its centre, then with the 10mm bolt, and finally with the T30 Torx bolt. Before we put the parcel shelf back in, we just need to tidy up the pump, so I wrapped some of the dried out soundproofing around the motor and then hid it behind the carpet. Still a perfect job that you'll get from a garage, but it's tucked up out of the way, and it'll be easy to access if you need to top up the pump oil again. So the final thing to do is reinstall the parcel shelf. You can slide it back in, making sure that it goes in on the driver's side first, so you get the clearance to swing it round into place. Then you need to reconnect the hinges. Do this by putting them up into their highest position and then pushing them into place. With the hinge properly seated, you need to put in the little spring clips that popped out earlier. They're at the front and back. Now I found the only way that I could do this was actually from the inside of the car, reaching over the back of the seats, guiding the clip into place and then pushing it until it clicks. Just be aware that they go in with the wider part facing outwards as shown here. And the last thing you do is reattach the fabric section to the parcel shelf. Pop it in one side and slide your thumb from one side to another. And that's the job done. You can now go out for a nice drive with the top down as this car was intended for, knowing that you saved a few £100 by doing the work yourself. All in all, it took me about 3 hours of my time, and because I was able to salvage the motor, it cost me nothing to repair. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're enjoying the videos, please feel free to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new uploads. Bye for now.